Hello everyone, Karen Porter, holistic nutritionist and wellness coach. And I want to thank you if you're joining me today. And I know it looks like I'm in the sauna, but I'm actually not. Although we do have a sauna at the cottage here, and I can't wait to open up the cottage for the 3-day wellness retreat. But in the meantime, we're virtual. And today at home with Karen, I'm going to be talking about the parasympathetic system and the vagus nerve. And you might be thinking, well, why is that important? But I'm going to show you and tell you why it is so important. We often hear about fight or flight and how our bodies were set up in, through our ancestors to be able to, be in a situation where if something is attacking us, our body goes into a fight or flight system. And so we are able to just react with the body systems that are most important for us to either fight that saber-toothed tiger or to run away fast enough. So the body turns on and off mechanisms in order to deal with that. So as I said, many of us have heard of that, and that is actually called the sympathetic nervous system. And when I first heard about the sympathetic nervous system when I was in nutrition school, I thought, well, that sounds good, sympathetic, right? But it actually is not the desirable one. The most desirable system is the parasympathetic system, and that is rest and digest. So these are two categories under the autonomic nervous system, which is unconscious in our, in our bodies, things that just functions that just carry on without us having to be involved in them. So why is it important that we know about the vagus nerve and that we know about being in a parasympathetic state? Well, it's important because it affects so many areas of our body. And when we think of rest and digest, we think, okay, well, that's important, obviously, for us to digest and our digestive system, but it's so much more than that. Looking after our vagus nerve or being in the parasympathetic state can help with things like IBS, I'm sorry, I can't talk today. Esophageal reflux, colitis, and so many other aspects of our health. So as I mentioned, I'm going to start first with digestion. So we know that the vagus nerve connects our brain to our gut, and it communicates back and forth. It's actually 20% from our brain to our gut and 80% from our gut to our brain. So what do they say to each other? Well, the brain activates and tells our mouth to produce saliva. It tells our stomach to produce hydrochloric acid, our pancreas to produce other digestive enzymes, for our bladder to produce bile that we need to digest fats, and for our small intestine to assimilate nutrients, and for our large intestine to have the peristalsis and mobility that we need, as well as contracting and releasing sphincters. So that's the message that goes from our brain to our gut. From our gut to our brain, there's messages of hunger and satiety, which are very, very important. But in terms of other systems that it impacts our immunity. So we know that when we are in the sympathetic nervous system of fight and flight, it suppresses our immune system. So we want to be able to trigger the parasympathetic nervous system and stimulate the vagus nerve to keep our body strong in terms of being able to fight off inflammation. When our immunity is low, we know that we can be bombarded with viruses, bacteria, and that can go on to promote inflammation in our bodies. So it wasn't originally thought to be affecting our immune system, but it very much is. The parasympathetic nervous system works along with the respiratory system to help us to relax our body, slow down our breath, as well as our heart rate and pulse through our deep breathing. It also affects our adrenals. So the autonomic nervous system doesn't control the adrenals, but being in the chronic sympathetic system will trigger an elevated HPA axis, which, without getting into a lot of the science, we need it to be normalized. And that's what the parasympathetic state does. As I mentioned, it affects our cardiovascular, it affects our heart rate. And then, as I mentioned, the vagus nerve affects our brain. So it keeps the fight or flight in check. And so the more often we engage in our parasympathetic nervous system, the more we're able to deal with the stimuli that is coming in, and we're able to react to it differently. So that, those are a number of the reasons why it's so important. It also affects our blood sugar, so that we know when we're in that chronic stress, that fight or flight, that our blood sugar is high along with our cortisol. So by staying in the parasympathetic state more often, we are able to keep our blood sugar more stable. It's also important for hormones and for detoxification. We need to be in the parasympathetic state for our body to detox, for our lymphatic system to work at its optimum, and the things that we're taking in that are not ideal to be released from our body. And again, because the vagus nerve normalizes our stress response, it can help stimulate our hormones, the hormones that we need to have balanced. So what are the ways that we can stimulate our vagus nerve and our parasympathetic system? Well, you've heard me talk about these before when I talked about how to deal with stress. So many of them involve our deep breathing. As I talked about before, the connection with our respiratory system and our vagus nerve are, very important. So that deep breathing is also involved in our meditation, in our yoga, and even our exercise. Again, all of these are very important. You may be familiar with essential oils, but the essential oils and smelling the essential oils affect our olfactory nerve, which again can stimulate positively our vagus nerve. So, having things like essential oils either on your body or being diffused in the room are very, very beneficial. Things like singing, chanting, laughter, and gargling are also ways to engage the parasympathetic nervous system. But most of all, we want to be mindful of the state that we are in. So if we are in, a stressful situation, we want to we can't eliminate those stressful situations always. Sometimes we can by setting boundaries. But when we can't, we want to, as much as possible, get into our parasympathetic system with any of those techniques. Also, nature bathing, being out in nature, in a forest. These are also things that are very beneficial to us. And I always work with my clients to try to use some of those things first thing in the morning when you're in a calm state. Now, maybe you wake up anxious, and that's, something that we can also work on. But if there is a calm point in your day, that's when it's good to try the deep breathing, or the brief meditation, or just closing your eyes and visualizing being somewhere calm, whether that's on a beach, floating in the water, sitting in the forest, whatever is calm for you, and just taking those abdominal deep breaths. But as I said, the being in our parasympathetic nervous system affects so many areas of the body, far beyond, what we originally thought. So I hope some of this information is helpful to you and you can incorporate it. And if you do have any questions, please put them in the comments, and I would be happy to answer you back and work with you on ways that you can engage the parasympathetic nervous system. Thank you.